Hi everyone, welcome to Emigrant's Life. I'm your host Daniel Biasi, and for the very first episode of this show, I asked a good friend of mine, Audrey, to share a story. She left her home country, Scotland, when she was only 19. She lived in the Middle East and Tahiti. She's now been living in Vancouver for the last 35 years, and she's been running her own marketing agency for the last 19. She's one of the most altruistic and generous people I know. She's involved in multiple charities. In 2018, she went to Malawi in Africa to help local people, local women, to teach them through business how they can provide for themselves and for their family. You can learn more about this project by visiting the website care.ca. It's spelled care.ca. And now, without further ado, please enjoy this episode with my good friend Audrey. Hi Audrey, thanks for being here today and welcome to the show.
Hi, Daniel. Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. So, you live in Vancouver. I know you for a couple of years now, but how long have you been living in Vancouver for?
So let me see. I came here for the first time in 1982 and I left. I didn't stay. And I came back in 1985. So 85, 95, is that 35 years?
35. Yeah, that's right.
First time I came was 1982. And I
Okay.
stayed here, I think we were here probably around 6 or 8 months. And
Okay.
we didn't like it very much. So I left.
Why you didn't like it?
So I'd been living in the Middle East and as an expat. So I'm originally from Scotland. I was born in Scotland. I grew up mostly in England. I didn't really like the UK very much, so I knew I wanted to leave. And I got the opportunity when I was 19 to go live in the Middle East. So I jumped at the chance and I was there for almost 5 years. And it was pretty cool there. Like, we didn't pay any taxes. We earned really good money. A company paid for our apartment, paid our telephone bills, pretty much took really good care of us, bought us a ticket to send us home every year. And so as an expat, it's a different lifestyle. I got tired of expat life and decided that we were going to immigrate somewhere other than go back to the UK or Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming to Canada was a bit of a shock because this is not expatriate community. So it was really hard to settle. When you're in an expatriate community, then you sort of make your own family really fast because your family's not there. So you make friends and you make really good friends pretty fast. Whereas here it was completely different. Everybody had their family around the corner. So no one really was looking to make a friend. So it was really hard to make friends here. That was the hardest thing, was to make friends.
Still not very easy to make friends in Vancouver. It's at least even for me that I come from like a small town. It's a big city and it's hard compared to other. Maybe I don't know. I never actually lived in a big city, so I can't really compare. But compared to other places I lived before, it's it's definitely more challenging. You was talking about expatriate. What's just like I don't know what that means. You mean people that emigrate?
No. So essentially, there are places in the world that are developing that require labor, workforce from elsewhere, particularly expert professionals that bring them in on contract. So I was still a resident of the United Kingdom, but I had a work visa to go work in the United Arab Emirates. Well, actually, my husband did. So I just sort of piggybacked on that. And it was for a limited period of time. So I don't remember how long a contract was. It was probably 5 years, something like that, but it was renewable. So you knew you weren't going to live there forever. It was temporary. So, expatriate means that, you're being repatriated back to your own country. You're just there for a contract period.
Okay. Is it any different from like a work permit, like me? people that move to a different country and manage to find a job and have a work permit for a couple of years. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, no, it's actually a little bit different because you came on spec. So you came to Canada. You decided you wanted to move to Canada, and
Mm-hmm.
you got a work permit, and you came here and looked for work. For us, it was different. We got the job before we left the UK. So,
Okay.
so the company was sponsoring us to go work there for a
A
year
limited
or
time.
two or five.
Okay.
So, large companies knew that they needed to bring people from the developed world there to help. So they would have, they might have hundreds of expatriates there. So when you're an
Okay.
expatriate, normally you're under the protection, if you like, or the company that's hiring you is taking care of you. So
Okay. Perfect.
they're providing you with accommodation, they're providing you with a ticket there and back. So it's just a little different because you came under your own steam. You just decided to take the risk, get a work
Yeah.
permit and come. So it's not quite the same.
Okay. Thanks for explaining that a little bit better. Okay. And you were talking about your husband. You went there for because of your husband. What was your husband was doing at the time?
So he was a pastry chef, and he was recruited by a chef that he worked with in the UK, who had a contract to go work in the United Arab Emirates. And he gathered up his whole brigade, his whole kitchen brigade, because he knew that he needed the experience of European chefs rather than going to the Middle East. There's a very, very small population in the United Arab Emirates, and certainly not skilled workers. So there may have been some locals working in the kitchen, but probably not. Um, Pretty much
Okay.
everybody there was expatriate. So he took his senior chefs from the UK, and then the junior, the commies, and the junior staff came from either India, Sri Lanka, or Pakistan.
Okay, cool. So you left the UK to move to the Middle East with your husband, and then you guys left the Middle East to move to Canada. Is that right?
Yes. So we'd been there for about 5 years, and I decided that, expatriate life was fun and we made a lot of money, but I didn't want to stay there forever. It wasn't really home. I wasn't really building community the way I wanted to. So I
Mm-hmm.
applied to leave there. Didn't want to go back to Europe. Definitely didn't want to live in France. Didn't want to live in the UK. My husband was at the time was French. Um, so we applied for the US, Canada, and Australia, and Canada said yes. So we came to Canada.
Okay, so you got to Canada with with what, like some kind of like a residency or some like a
Yeah,
permit to become a
yeah,
resident?
that's right. With our landed immigrant status, so we had 6 months to
Okay.
come, and we landed, and then we were no longer expatriates because we were just like living in Canada, trying to find a job, trying to find somewhere to live. I was expecting my second baby, so we needed to figure that out pretty quickly. Um, yeah, and I was lucky because we had my mom's brother lived in near Vancouver, so we had somewhere to go and we had somewhere to stay to start off with.
Oh wow, that must have been like a huge help.
Yeah, no, that was fabulous just to have family here that could show us the ropes. I mean, you might think that, Canada and the UK are similar, but yeah, there's lots of differences. So there's lots of things to learn in those first couple of months.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Plus having like some family member near makes me feel like makes the place feel like a more like home, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You're not
for
like all
sure.
are you by
Yeah.
yourself. It's
Yeah.
definitely helps. Another question, but like going back to the your life in the Middle East, how was like the Emirates back then? Because I
Oh,
guess that they changed so much, especially in the last few years. What was
yeah,
the lifestyle back then, especially from
yeah.
like a
So,
woman's perspective? Because we know in those countries can be a little bit challenging for women. Did you find that a problem? What was the situation?
well, I'd love to go back and see it now. So, to answer the first question, it was like a big construction yard. It was really like living in a construction yard because, back in the late 70s, really where we were living, Sharjah, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, was just in the very early of developing stages. So there were cranes everywhere, there was construction everywhere. The hotel we were working in was brand new, literally wasn't even finished when we arrived. We were there for the opening. Um, as far as being a woman, being a Caucasian woman was probably a lot better than being from any other part of the world, um, just because we got a little bit more respect, but it was definitely a male dominated society there. And we were, rather second class citizens unless you were white. Um,
Okay.
so I witnessed some situations that I definitely was not comfortable with, where other women were treated quite poorly by men, and that wasn't good for me. Being young, I worked for a company. Started off working for a civil engineering company. If you lived in Sharjah at that time, then you needed to have a work permit. Sorry, you needed to have a liquor license and you needed to have a driving license. And you had to go to the municipality, the equivalent of the municipality, to get that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was designated the one to go because many other companies would send some of their junior staff members who were normally from India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka, and they were usually males, and they had to stand in the line. But if you were a white
Okay.
woman, you got to go to the front of the line. So as soon as you
Oh,
sort of
really? Okay.
passed there, then you just floated to the front of the line, and you got your rubber stamps and so on and so forth. And away you go. You went and you got done what you wanted to do. So that was kind of handy. That came in handy. But as far as dress and being alone, I didn't feel afraid. I always made sure that my shoulders and were covered, and that I was wearing a dress that wasn't short, down to my knees. When I wandered around the marketplace, we
Mm-hmm.
did go to the beach, and we did get into bikinis and swimsuits, but we were careful to make sure that we didn't. That we went somewhere that was a little bit isolated and safe, and didn't flaunt in front of um, the community. So, in fact, I
Okay.
think at the time we were members of a club, and we would go there because it was sort of a little bit private. So you definitely had to be careful.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So you stayed in the Middle East for about 5 years, and then you moved to Vancouver. How long did you guys stay before you
Uh,
decided to leave
yeah,
again?
we were here probably about six to 8 months, and then we didn't like it. And so my husband got a contract with the same hotel chain that he was working with in the Middle East.
Okay.
And it was an opportunity to go live on the island of Tahiti in French Polynesia. And I remember us getting this offer and kind of going, how could we say no?
Yeah.
Like, why would we stay here when we've got the chance to go live in Tahiti? It just sounded sort of idyllic. So he went before me, and then off I went. By then, I had my second child, and off I went to Tahiti. And yeah, it was really cool. It was a really neat experience. I used to call it our Snoopy Dog hut, was our home. It had a corrugated iron roof, so when it rained, it was really noisy. And it was pretty much, it was really hard to keep the insects out. In fact, it was impossible. And the cockroaches and the mice. We were on a septic tank, but we were surrounded by this beautiful garden. We were 2 minutes from the beach. The beach was gorgeous. The garden had the most spectacular flowers. We grew grapefruits and bananas in the garden, and yeah, it was just
So
it was a really cool experience. And the hotel was gorgeous, and the weather was fabulous, and
yeah, sounds
yeah.
horrible.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. The only thing with Tahiti is it's a very small island, and you can drive around it in half a day. And again, we were expats. We were considered expats because we were on
Mhm.
contract, and the company was taking care of us, provided us with accommodation and tickets home, etc. Um, and we made friends really quickly there. Again, similar to the Middle East, because there were lots of other expats from Europe that were just didn't have their family close. So, we formed really close-knit bonds with a really neat group of people quite quickly. But it was somewhat
Okay.
limiting for me because at that time there was no reciprocal agreement. There was no EU back then that said that I could work there. So I couldn't go to work.
Okay.
So I was kind of staying at home with the kids, and I'd always wanted to have a career. So it wasn't really forever. It was small. You were limited, and it was sort of kind of like being on a vacation for me.
Which wasn't too bad, right? Because you
Yeah,
just had your
yeah,
second child. So being like in Tahiti and not be able to work, I mean, like this kind of like vacation, give you like a more time to actually take care of your two childrens, right?
yeah. I mean, you're right. For the first couple of months, it was kind of nice, but then I started to get a bit antsy because yeah, I wanted to have a career. So
Okay.
we decided that we hadn't really given Canada a chance. That we had heard sort of on the circuit that if you really wanted to make it home, you needed to give it at least 2 years, even if it was difficult. You had to stick it out 2 years, and we really had only stayed. I think
Six,
it was
six.
probably 8 months. I was probably in Canada 8 months. I didn't really give it a chance. I didn't really get a chance to make any friends. So we decided that we would return. So we did.
Okay.
So that was
Yeah,
in
I agree.
85.
Yeah, I agree with you with the fact that yeah, you at least you need to spend like at least a year or two before you can actually
Yeah.
start liking the place and actually making a decision if you want to stay or not. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. So you stay in Tahiti for the, like a 3 years or something like that?
2 years. Yeah.
2 years.
two
It's
years
okay.
in
Like
Tahiti.
okay, and then back to Canada.
Yeah. Back to Canada, back to the same house. So we had bought a house and we had rented it out. So we moved back into the same house, and yeah, I got a job. So I sort of started my career then. I felt finally like, this was good. And the other thing that really was key was that my husband got a job. He was a pastry chef, and he got a good job at the Hyatt, which is like a big, 4-star hotel. So, he
Okay.
felt like it felt a lot better than it had the first time, because it was hard for him to find work the first time, and I couldn't work because I was pregnant. But this time we settled in fairly quickly, and we knew the ropes. It was easier coming back because we'd already learned a lot of the stuff, about Canada and how it was different. So it was way easier to settle in the second time, and I was determined that we were going to give it a run, and we did. I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. But even there, like, how easy was it to? Because you went to Canada the first time on like on this like a permit to become a resident, and then you left for 2 years. Could you just come back to Canada with the first permit you got, or you actually needed to apply for a second one? How did that work?
Yeah, so back then the rules were that you could leave for a certain period of time and not lose your landed immigrant status, and we got back just under the wire. So we
Okay,
just sailed back in. And the other thing was we had to prove that we hadn't abandoned Canada. So we kept our home here and a bank account,
okay.
and we still filed our Canadian taxes. So really, it was almost as if Canada didn't even notice we'd left. There was nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, we got back in. I mean, had we waited another few years, we might have had to have reapplied, but we didn't.
Okay. No, because I might be wrong here, but I think right now, if you go like apply for a residency, if you get a permanent residency in Canada, you need to stay in the country for like 6 months a year for not losing your residency. Uh, but even then, I might be wrong. Things change so quickly, and I can't keep up with everything. So
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was different back then. And when we came back in, then we really hunkered down and did the 3-year, stayed for a full 3 years to make sure we got our permanent residency. Like we became Canadian citizens as quickly as we
okay.
could, because that would give us freedom to leave and come and go as we pleased, whereas as landed immigrants, we were more limited.
Have you ever thought about, because you since then you never left Canada, and I guess you're happy to stay to live here in Vancouver. But have you ever thought about like what if instead of like getting the opportunity to go to Canada, you had the opportunity to go to Australia. How would that all be, right? Have you ever
Yeah. Oh,
thought about
yeah.
something like that?
Oh, yeah. I think about that often. Like, it was just chance that Canada said yes to us, and it could easily have been the US or Australia. So I don't really have any regrets. I'm actually just grateful that it was Canada. I love it here.
US and Australia, did they get back to you, or did they just deny it, or they just get back to you too late?
I don't really remember, Daniel. I don't
Okay.
remember. I think they probably got back. I know the rules in Australia at the time, so this is a long time ago, was the rule was that you had to find a job and get a job offer, and then within Australia, the company that had offered you the job had to prove they couldn't find someone there to fill the job. So you had to have a pretty
Okay.
unique skill set. Like you had to be like a rock star or a scientist or like something really unique, like,
But
you know,
that doesn't
yeah.
change that much. Even right now, even for like to apply for a work permit, you need to the company, the sponsor, you need to prove that is hiring you immigrant because there's no any other local that can do your job, which means that you need to have like I don't know, more experience or like a more qualification or something like that. So that's fairly normal for like to get a work permit. At least that was for me in New Zealand. That was the same things here for me in Canada.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty challenging though when you're young because you're more likely to be accepted into a country when you're under 35. And when you're under
Hmm.
35, you don't necessarily have a unique skill set because you're still learning. You're still early in your career. So I do know of one couple from Ireland that did get into Australia, and he was a chef. But I think it was pretty tough. I think it was really hard. And it wasn't just proving that there was no one else to do the job. They had to advertise the job, I think, for 6 months or a year at the time. And maybe
Oh,
it's still
okay.
the same, I don't know. But your specific job, so they would hire you conditionally, and then they would advertise it, and then they had to go back and prove that none of the applicants were as good as you. So it was quite stringent. And I think the US was just saying no. I think we just got a rejection letter from them. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But yeah, no, you're probably right. I take it for granted that I managed to get a visa when I was in New Zealand, when I went to New Zealand, and now to Canada. And probably I take it for granted that I started working after high school, straight out from high school, as a telecommunication technician in one of the biggest, probably the biggest company in Italy for telecommunication.
yeah,
And I gained like 7 to 9 years in telecommunication in Italy before I left. So as an immigrant, it was actually a good skill to have, which
yeah.
is like so I was coming from Italy with like 9 years of experience in telecommunication, which is like it's not an easy field to get in. And so I probably even like, as I say, like I probably took that as a for granted. Uh, but it's, yeah, I think it's more challenging, as you say, like if you are 30 years old, you like you work as a bartender, for example, you do
Yeah.
like a small jobs here and
Hmm.
there. It's definitely, yeah, it's definitely harder to get a sponsorship because you don't have the years experience that you were talking about. Yeah, thanks. Was a good reminder. Thanks.
Hmm.
Okay, going back to when you were in Tahiti, you said you wanted to leave because you couldn't work and because you wanted to have a career. Um, when you went back to Canada, did you manage to find a job and start a career? Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. When I came back to Canada, I felt like I had lost time. I had graduated in business studies in the UK and then gone to the Middle East. It was pretty hard to pursue a career in the Middle East because women were really mostly would fill administrative roles. So I had an admin role there in the Middle East, and then I went to Tahiti and couldn't work. So from my perspective, by the time I got here, I was, I think, about 27, and I'd been, wasting time because I hadn't started my career, it felt. And then when I did get a job, it was a pretty administrative type role. So that was kind of disappointing. So, here I am feeling like I'd lost a lot of time. But I was lucky. I went to work for a small startup in a high-tech company. It was a startup. There were just 9 of us, and I was able to get promotions as the company grew. So I was there with that company for 17 years. I feel like it wasn't boring at all. I played so many roles in the company, and we went from 2 million Canadian a year to 160 US, 160 million US per year. We
Mm-hmm.
were acquired by another company. I um, before before I left, I was director of global communications, marketing communications. So, I felt like I could get ahead here, and I don't know that I could have gotten ahead in the same way had I stayed in Scotland. Things just felt a lot more limiting there, and there's a lot more opportunity for people here. There isn't the same class structure that there is in the UK that can really hold people back. And then at the end of that stint with that company, they decided to move the office down to the US, and I didn't want to live in the US. So I started my own company, and I'm still running that same company today. So that's been 19 years of being owner operator of a marketing consulting company. So yeah, Canada's been really good to me from that perspective. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity here, and there's a lot of help um, and encouragement for people to get ahead.
Oh, that's cool. So after 17 years to work for like a this startup company, you decide not to go to the US and decide I'm gonna go my own way. I'm gonna start my own agency, like a marketing agency, right?
Yeah, yeah. Vancouver, you say Vancouver is a big city, but it's, in my perspective, I don't think it's a big city. I think it's a small
Mm-hmm.
town, and there aren't a lot of headquarters here, and there aren't a lot of positions that are global. In Vancouver, there's a lot of companies that are, citywide or province-wide or national or maybe North American. But to actually have the opportunity to have a global position is kind of rare because there aren't many headquarters here. You really need to go to Calgary or Toronto for that. So I figured, though, that there were a lot of other small startups that wanted to become global or wanted to, conquer North America, because of course our biggest market is in the U.S. So I thought, well, maybe I could, take what I'd learned in the 17 years I worked for the technology company and help other technology companies in Vancouver, and that's what I did. Except I've worked with technology companies and malls and lots of different types of companies. I didn't stick to only technology, and yeah, it's been fun. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I don't know. Vancouver for me feels like a really like a huge city, and I don't know. We have like a different perspective. Even I see a lot of like I mean, as I said, my background is like is a small town in northern Italy, and then New Zealand, which is like a remote island in the middle of nowhere. So coming here for me, like I can see like I don't know, there's an office in downtown for like a Microsoft got his office in downtown. Many other like a 10 big tech companies got like their offices in downtown. So for me, this is like a huge hub for like technology, and I definitely see Vancouver as a huge city. And you don't probably with time, I will see Vancouver the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, so you traveled, so you left the UK, you moved to the Middle East, then Canada, then Tahiti, and then back to Canada. So now you've been in Canada for a while now. What did make you stay in Canada? Why did you try something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've often thought about leaving Canada. I even thought about going back to the UK. I got a very good job offer probably around 10 years ago. Um, I really didn't want to go back to the UK. I I thought about um, going somewhere warmer or somewhere better. I mean, I think that we're just programmed to think that the grass is greener on the other side. But a few things have kept me here and continued to keep me here. One is that I had traveled enough to recognize there's no utopia. right? I didn't like the UK, went to the Middle East. I didn't really, want to stay in the Middle East forever. I came here, went to Tahiti. I definitely didn't want to live in Tahiti forever. So I realized that it's what you make of it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I was challenged here. I had a career, I had a family that were in school. It becomes a little bit more difficult to just pack up and move when you've got three
Yeah,
kids in
yeah,
school, and especially when they get into high school, which is, one of the reasons I said no to moving to the US is because my youngest daughter was in high school and I thought it would really be disruptive for her. So and now of course the kids are grown up, and if I leave, then I'll be leaving them because they're not coming with me. They've got their own lives here in Vancouver. So, that's kind of partially it, but I think really the biggest part was recognizing there is no utopia. It's pretty darn good here. Um, I've made some really good friends, and the weather's not too bad. I mean, it's pretty dreary and dark in the winter, but
yeah.
suck it up, buttercup. Like, it's not the end of the
Yeah.
world.
Summer is pretty nice.
Until COVID-19, the economy's been good and Vancouver's been good to me. I've, made a good living. I like the work that I do. I'm established here. I think about, moving sometimes somewhere else and having to start from scratch, and it just makes me feel tired. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to be here. And when this COVID-19, when and if it's over, just to retire here and travel and see more of the world that way.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think it's even because when you like a move from country to country and you start feeling like a need to have like a place that you can call home. At least that was for me. Because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when you settle down, you got your circle of friends, you got your job, you start your career, whatever, you feel like you're home. While you keep traveling, yeah, it's pretty cool. You meet cool different people, you live like in exotic places, but you're missing home. You're missing a place that you can call home. It takes time before you can
Yeah.
actually call a place really home. And that's more like a
Yeah.
it's I think for in my opinion, maybe your perspective is different. Like a home is really like about people around you. It's not just like a place. It's not like a building. It's not like a cool town with good weather. It's actually the people around you that makes you feel home.
And it's interesting that, what you're reminding me by saying that is that for me, I always call Scotland home. Like, even though I've lived more of my life here, I say I'm going home. And when I say I'm going home in that context, it means I'm getting on a plane and I'm traveling to Scotland. I'm traveling back to what was my original home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this is definitely where I live, and this is where I intend to stay. Um, the other thing that crossed my mind there is, that's where that term came from, home sweet home. Like, it's great
Mm-hmm.
to travel, but there's nowhere like home, like coming back to your own place and your own people.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. I heard once that, as an immigrant, you're neither fish nor fowl, because your home really isn't. When I travel to the UK now, people don't think I'm from there. They think that I'm,
Mm-hmm.
they recognize that I speak a little bit differently, and that something just clues them in that I'm not from there. So I'm a foreigner in my own country. Until recently, most people didn't think I was from here either. So, they can, if they listen really carefully, they'll detect, an accent that isn't truly Canadian, that there's a bit of a lilt, or there's something there that just triggers, yeah, she's not from here. Where's she from? Is it South Africa? Is it Australia? Is it, yeah, where is it? So neither is this home, although it feels, they both feel like home to me. So you just learn to live with that. That's no big deal.
Yeah, no, that's true. I don't know. For me, like, I don't know. Probably the thing is personal. But even when I go back to Italy, I maybe it comes like a natural calling home, but I don't feel like a home because it's not a place where I want to live, and that home is where you actually want to live, in my perspective. So
Mm.
I don't, yeah, I don't call Italy home, even though it's my hometown, my home country, but it's doesn't at least as a feeling doesn't feel like home. Even though I love every time I go back, I love people, I love spending time with like friends and family. I love everything about it. But because I don't want to live there, I have like this strong feeling that I don't want to live there. That doesn't make me feel like home.
Mm.
I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, just different perspectives. I guess it's a different use of the word home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
It was the biggest challenges you have to face when you left the UK, or like another when you just left the UK, like in general. What's the biggest challenge from
missing family? Yeah, that was the hardest. Was missing family. And back in those days, we didn't have email and Skype and FaceTime. Like we didn't have any of those things. So
yeah.
I was dependent on letters and the very occasional, very expensive phone call. Like if I got a phone call, I mean, I couldn't afford to phone home. I mean, I mean, it was just cost prohibitive. So my parents would phone me rarely. So a call was a big deal. And so we were very dependent on sending letters to one another. And so I was very homesick. But I loved the challenge. I loved the weather. Oh my God, the weather's so bad in Scotland. So, I mean, to have sunshine all the time, I loved the weather. I loved the heat. Um, yeah, it really wasn't that hard. And we made friends very quickly. So that helps too.
Yeah, even that, like another thing, I realized that using like a internet, like a FaceTime, Skype, whatever, to keep contact with your family, like it's such a great thing. Like I remember the first time I went back to Italy after like a year and a half or something like that. But I was seeing my family every weekend over FaceTime. That when my brother came to pick me up at the airport, I don't know, we just feel like we didn't see each other for like a couple of weeks. It was just a weird feeling. It was like I didn't feel like I didn't see him like for a long time. I just feel like oh, you know exactly what's going on with my life. We spoke over the phone the other day. Like I don't know, and definitely is a huge help right now. Yeah, you're right. I can't even believe it. Like what means like not seeing your family. Like just yeah. I can't even imagine the challenge you have to face. And how often back then did you went back to?
So once a year. Once a year. Yeah, every year.
Once a year yes, because you were like a paid by
the company paid. Yeah, the company paid for us to go back once a year. They paid our ticket.
Oh, that's cool. Last question. Do you feel like you have an advantage, or you feel like lucky to be an immigrant?
I do. I remember the day that I went to the ceremony to become Canadian, and it really hit me how lucky I was because I was there with people who were refugees who had, fled their country, and Canada was a safe haven. I felt as if, the UK really wasn't that bad if you compare it to Syria or some of the places that other people had come from. So I had a fallback, but it really hit me how privileged I was to become a Canadian citizen. And I think that people who were born here take it for granted. They take this country for granted, but it's a pretty cool place. And I'm really grateful. And I know going through the application process that it wasn't easy, and there was a lot of concern that we wouldn't be accepted. That you have to have a medical exam, and what if you fail, or what if what if you sit your interview and you fail. So yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. I don't regret coming here, but I do regret not being close to my family, especially as my mom and dad aged and passed away. I have regrets about not having an opportunity to spend more time with them.
Yeah, that's the toughest part by like leaving your life, your family behind. Yeah, that's definitely. I think that's what everybody feels when they have to leave their country. But even though, like, do you think like because you left and you move to a different country, you have to learn. And in your case, you didn't have to learn the language, but you have to learn like how the things work in different country. Do you have to integrate you went to the Middle East, so you have to integrate with like their society, like the way to live. And then Tahiti, do you feel like your ability to adapt, and even in most cases maybe get a job maybe you were not happy to do just because you have to pay the bills? Do you think that is an advantage for having that fuel in you?
Yeah, I think that, as a child, we moved a lot. So for me, change was normal. We lived in Dundee, we moved to Glasgow, we moved down to Wakefield, we went to Birmingham, we went back up to the south of Glasgow. Like there was a lot of moves and a lot of changes, school changes for me as I was growing up. And I think that gave me a resilience that helped me and probably fueled me to leave the UK and seek, something better outside of the shores of the UK. And I think that by the time I landed here, having moved from the Middle East to here to Tahiti and back again, it definitely helped me. And it gave me a broader outlook. My mom used to say that the next best thing to a good education is travel, because we just learn so much when we're traveling. And so I just learned so much that I just took for granted. The way, when I arrived in the Middle East, I was only 19. I didn't know anything really. And I just took it all in my stride, Ramadan, Eid, the different customs, the clothing, and I think back about it, now I just sort of just took it as, oh yeah, that's what they do here. That's how they do it. And, but I learned a lot, and I think it made me, more broad-minded, and I'm sure it helped me when I got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks a lot for chatting with me. That was a great honor.
Mm-hmm.
Great honor to
Thank
be in the
you.
show.
Thanks for interviewing me.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, Daniel here. Hope you enjoyed this first episode of Immigrants Live. I apologize for the sound quality. I didn't receive the microphone in time for this interview. But if you like to support the show, you can subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening. The show is now on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Deezer, and Radio Public. You can find all the links and more about the show on the website immigrantslife.com, or you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to be on the show, send us an email at stories@immigrantslife.com. Thanks for listening.